My name is Liz Sitch. I hope you can hear me at the back. I'm chair of the Hornsey Town Hall Trust. The Trust is an independent buildings preservation trust, and we've been working with Haringey Council for very many years to secure the future of the magnificent Grade 2 star-listed Hornsey Town Hall. Our aim was to ensure it's fully and appropriately restored, but at the same time made sustainable and fit for purpose in the long term as an arts centre and community space, free at the point of access. Tonight's talk will focus on the complex restoration work that's currently being undertaken at the Town Hall, ahead of its reopening towards the end of this year or early next. First to speak tonight is Claire Brady.
Thank you, Liz. That's a lovely introduction. Thank you. So I'm Claire Brady. I'm an Inspector of Historic Buildings and Areas, and I work for Historic England, which is the national organisation for promoting heritage. So we're government funded, we're a quango, but we don't actually answer to the government. And I extracted from our website a little bit about what we do. We are the public body that helps people care for, enjoy and celebrate England's spectacular historic environment. We protect, champion and save the places that define who we are and where we've come from as a nation. We care passionately about the stories they tell, the ideas they represent and the people who live, work and play among them. Working with communities and specialists, we share our passion, knowledge and skills to inspire interest, care and conservation so everyone can keep enjoying and looking after the history that surrounds us. The organisation is quite large. There's about 900 people work in it, and we're nationwide. We don't cover Wales or Scotland, but it's all of England, and we have 7 regional offices, and we do a variety of different functions. Listing is one of the primary functions of the organisation. So when you hear the term listed building, it's actually a national list that all of the buildings of special architectural and historic interest that are identified are actually put on. There's also a variety of other assets, such as scheduled ancient monuments, registered parks and gardens, battlefields and wrecks. And Historic England actually administers the list rather than making decisions. It's actually government that we recommend to, but we sort of maintain the list and keep it up to date. And the next section on our website, so you can look at our website, this is the front page, is advice. So this is my area of work. So we provide advice in our team, I'm in the London team, on repairs and works to heritage assets, that's buildings, places, etc., and on change affecting the historic environment. We're also a statutory consultee on works affecting the historic environment. So that's things like planning applications and listed building consents within certain categories. So we get sent the drawings and we get to comment. And as we did on this site, we also have teams that specialise in areas such as archaeology, project work, grants and liaising with government to help shape policy about the historic environment. So the next section is research. We actually have whole teams that do fantastic research across the organisation into the history of places, and also they help inform the lists of buildings. So they will do all of the background research that really helps to decide what is special and what should be listed and protected. We also have a conservation team, and they help us with the latest technology, and they investigate things like climate change, for example. We've got a climate change team that are fantastically helpful, and they're doing lots of research into climate change and the effects on the historic environment. There are a lot of effects actually, and it's quite scary. We also have a lot of it culminated in images and books. So I don't know if you know, there's an archive at Swindon which holds a national record of many listed buildings and places, and it's got fantastic photographs, etc. So next slide. I thought I'd tell you about me, because I arrived at Historic England 15 years ago. I previously worked at 2 local boroughs as a conservation officer in London. So I've done 25 years of my time working on beautiful places in London. And my first job when I arrived at Historic England, or English Heritage as it was then, was to go through 10 boxes of filing on these wonderful buildings. So I mean, if I was being a bit more educational, I'd go, where are they? But I think you'll recognise them. So it was the big sort of St Pancras refurbishment. I picked up the tail end of that, and now I still manage it on a sort of monthly basis. And the restoration and repair of King's Cross Station by John McCasden Architects. These were just amazing projects to have been involved in, where dramatic change to the buildings really resulted in, I think, one of the most fantastic environments. If you've ever travelled through the stations, they work really well, they're beautifully repaired, and today they're fantastically managed. I also worked on the goods yard to the north of King's Cross. I don't know if you know it, it's the University of the Arts. We worked with Stanton Williams on the granary building, and it was a bit of a fight and it was a bit of fun, and we had lots of fun trying to convince them it was really worth keeping massive elements of the building. And I think I had a turning point when the architect said to me, I really like this element and I want to keep it. And I thought, yes. And luckily I've not had to do that with Regine. So also gas holders. This is another friendly thing I like. I love gas holders. So we've got a triplet gas holder at King's Cross, and we've got gas holder 8, all of which were basically piles of gas holders in a field, and we saw their restoration, repair and return to King's Cross. So all of this has taught me that actually sometimes change has to happen to enable buildings and places to have a future, and that's basically one of the principles behind one of our publications here, which is constructive conservation, which I put a few articles into, particularly about King's Cross. And we've really sort of advocated that and really understanding significance to identify where change should happen. So Poplar Bars on the right is a really fantastic Grade 2 listed building in the East End. It was a place where people washed and they went to swim and get fit and watch boxing matches, but it became defunct in the 1980s. And really trying to find new uses for these buildings, we very carefully analysed what was special and then sort of focused change on the areas that were least special. And if you go and see it today, I think it's fantastic change, but sometimes you have to accept change that's a little bit difficult. So losing the pool from the main hall was one of my big compromises, but I think it was worth it. It's very well used. In terms of current projects, don't know if you know the dinosaurs at Crystal Palace. I'm very active working on those. There's a big research project happening there with the Friends, who were fantastic and really help us. The EMD Cinema in Walthamstow, it's Grade 2 star Komijareski, said it, cinema, which is such a bling palace of fun from the 1930s. So I go there quite a lot and love that building. Lambeth Palace, Grade 1. You think it's fantastic, but actually it needs major overhaul. And it's a zero carbon scheme that's coming in, and it's really interesting. And then my latest fun is 7 listed gas holders out at Bromley by Bow. What do you do with a gas holder that's sitting on a site which is completely contaminated? It's like, yeah, you know. And it costs 10 million per frame to refurbish. So anyway, right, Hornsey Town Hall, the juicy stuff. Okay, I hope you recognise this window. Where is it? Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? So let's have a look. This was by Frederick J. Mitchell, and he basically did this, and it went into what's now the Grade 2 listed library. It basically tells the story of Hornsey as a borough. So Hornsey was mainly developed in the sort of 19th century, but the actual borough came about in 1894 when 3 different boroughs or parishes were all mixed together to make a new borough. So I think we have Highgate, we have Tottenham, and we have, where is it, Hornsey? Yes, so they all came together and they needed a new town hall because they all had little administrative centres, but they needed somewhere to focus lots of new activities upon. It was decided to focus the town hall sort of in the middle of Hornsey Borough, and they chose a site on the High Street, or Broadway, at Crouch End. And it was actually the site of a house and sort of orchard, and yeah, it sort of came back from the street. You can see it in the middle of the left-hand side. And it was a thriving sort of town centre, so it kind of made sense to have your administrative functions there. And the borough decided to appoint an architect and went out to competition in the 1930s to create a new town hall. So this is what we had as town halls before that time. You recognise these sort of mighty institutions. Again, I'd like to ask you, but I can't, what they have in common. I mean, basically, they're the real sort of show-off pieces of their local community. They were created in stone, the highest quality materials. They basically celebrate everything about the local area. Often they're using the best quality materials that people can find, but sometimes it's sort of local materials to display wealth and grandeur and, local crafts. So I think we have Birmingham, we have Leeds, Manchester and East Ham, surprisingly. And there's a lot of commonalities about them. They usually follow very traditional types of architecture, inspired by classicism or Gothic architecture. And they've often got things like clock towers and things that really show themselves off to the local community and say, look, we're here, we've arrived, this is your centre and you should be really proud of us. They also often have town hall squares, which were designed to really complement the buildings. By the 1930s, this is how town halls had evolved. And these are all London examples. So I thought I'd draw out exactly the situation as it was when Hornsey were thinking of appointing an architect for a town hall. And again, you can see real commonalities here of these early 1930s buildings. Quite grand. They're slightly pared back, maybe because people didn't want to spend quite as much money. There seems to be less emphasis on the clock tower, and there's a lot of Portland stone, which is obviously all imported, rather than it being anything local. Generally, they're designed by really good architects, though, and a lot of these are now listed. We've got a couple of grade 2-star ones, which is Hackney in the bottom left, which is sort of Art Deco inspired, and on the bottom right, that's County Hall, which is now the London Aquarium, and the Shrek exhibition, I believe. So, moving on from those. So, the competition, I believe, that Hornsey ran had about 200 people going in for it. And that's quite a lot to sort through. I mean, the competition to refurbish it had far fewer. Reginald Uren was the winning architect, and he was a young guy from New Zealand who hadn't actually done that much work in the UK. He'd recently arrived. And he came up with this amazing sort of classical, pared-down, modernist town hall that was nothing really like anything we'd seen in the UK. It was inspired very much by Stockholm Town Hall, which you can see in the left top, which is 1923 by Ragnar Osterberg, and Hilversum in 1931 on the right. So these are really sort of striking ahead of their time, looking to continental Europe. And, it's not something we'd really embraced at all, this type of architecture in the UK. And it was obviously very inspirational, and many followed on from Uren's sort of architecture and rectilinear lines and very simple horizontals, towers coming up. For example, if you know Greenwich at all, that has a very similar town hall. But again, he didn't go all out with the materials. He kept it very sort of reticent and used brick, which I believe, isn't sourced from too far. He also was commissioned to design a town square. So really, Hornsey was showing that they were very proud of their new town hall. And it was flanked by the electricity showroom and the gas showroom, which are obviously major providers of utilities at the time. They were quite new. People hadn't had gas and electricity much before that time, and they were often produced by national bodies and administered by national bodies. And so gas showrooms and electric showrooms popped up in every town, and they're often provided as part of like a library system or, etc. So this is wonderful. He actually went into partnership with Arthur Ayres, who's a sculptor, who designed these great panels which sit on the gas showroom. So you need to look up next time you go there and have a look. They tell the story of gas. So it's like little flames and, people mining and all that kind of thing. And it just really sets the town hall off, doesn't it, the square? I mean, we'll all have our comments about what's happening with it in the future, but you know, the fact it's set back and you get that wonderful vista, and it just opens up as you come around the corner on the Broadway. You don't automatically see it. And the tower is obviously the crowning piece at the top. So I thought I'd drop this one in. About 8 years ago, we went on site to the town hall when we were still discussing the marketing exercise, and we found this in the basement. And I don't really have a mouse, but I'll wander over. So that's the town hall, okay? And clearly, Reginald Uren and the Hornsey Borough had bigger ideas. They wanted to expand massively and create a whole town hall complex. At least that's the assumption I'm making from this, but I thought you'd really enjoy seeing it. And in comparison, this is obviously what it is today. So they did buy up one block, but there's a huge number of houses maybe you guys actually live in that would have been flattened had they got their way. So whilst we love heritage, we sometimes have to think through, there is a story here, and actually if people got their way, they might have done a lot more than they actually got the chance to do. So, right, okay. This is by the same sculptor, Arthur Ayres. I'm sure you're really familiar with these, but we've got the main gates. I mean, Regine will tell us all about these later, but they're in bronze. And he worked almost in the arts and crafts tradition, Uren, that he actually brought detail in that was of such high quality that, you know, whilst some areas of the build were fairly cheap and cheerful, quality was at every point where you looked and it made a difference. So, you know, as you entered the building, as you went in the main circulation spaces, all the materials were really high quality and very beautiful to touch and very interactive, sort of telling stories about what was important to the people of the borough and to the place. And he didn't actually ignore the back. I mean, if you've been round to many buildings, you go around the back and it's awful. It's often an afterthought, but this building has the most fantastic rear, and as part of the new development, it will be seen better, I'm hoping. And if you look at it, it's got that 1930s feel to it, quite modern, with the sort of clear horizontals and verticals, and that beautiful staircase with the bowed window that I absolutely love. Okay, so really, what did it do? You know, well, it was supposed to serve all the things that Hornsey as a borough needed to do. And so we have a fantastically huge concert hall. Boroughs used to provide entertainment. It was part of what they did. You know, and the concert hall would be multifunctional. Some places you would have had concerts, you would have had events, you possibly would have had boxing, you would have had pantomimes throughout the year. It was always meant to be sort of something particularly serving the public. And then to the right, that's where you enter into, sorry to get in the way. So this is the main entrance. And above it was a suite of committee rooms where people would have met. And obviously they had to make a lot of decisions in a council because that's what they're there for. How do you spend the money? So also you can see the elliptical arrangement in the top corner, and that's the seating for the main committee chamber. So you would have had the chair of the committee sitting at the head of the table with the deputies and all the committee members sitting around, and then in the old days the likes of me standing up there with a projector and trying to tell them that they want to sign off this planning application. So then you've got a whole series of rooms that you can see left and right, and this is where the minions worked, the people that took the money and process the applications, whole series of really small, tiny sort of cellular working offices. And until, you know, probably the early 2000s, local authorities still worked like that. It was very common. And only recently have things changed. But those rooms, as Regine's got pictures as well, and I have, weren't always plain. They were actually sometimes beautifully detailed. So here's some of the interiors. So we've got bottom left is the main auditorium, very sort of simplistically styled, but it had things like curtains that were designed by Heels, we believe, in conjunction with the architect, and furniture. So you've got the right is the committee room at the bottom. Then up, you've got where the committee members hung out. I mean, in the olden days, committee members used to get food and drink, you know. I worked at one borough where until the late 90s, they still got bought after making a decision, which was quite fun. You know, I was a bit shocked. So next slide. And this is the quality of the interiors, as you can see. They're absolutely amazing. And what was amazing to me was a lot of this stuff was still there. You know, we went on site and it's still there. Not in a great condition, but things like the furniture got taken away to be sort of stored. And Regine will show you photos. And we went to have a look at the warehouse and we're like, wow, you know, and a lot of it's designed by Heels, so it's absolutely amazing quality. And inside, we've got these wonderful features as well. Again, we've got a coat stand, I love that. But, you know, a whole load of things which are not part of the listed building. If you can really pick them up and move around, you're not really fixed down. So it was a bit of a matter of trust that, you know, the borough was going to do the right thing and pass them on to whoever gets to own it, who would hopefully embrace this as part of the new use. We've got clocks. There were absolutely tons of clocks. Was it 50 something?
78.
Oh, right, okay. Throughout the building, and they were all driven by this master clock that sat in the basement. And again, the railings on the staircase. I mean, everywhere we looked, there was just really beautifully designed, bespoke things. And the clocks tell a story as well. I love the fact that everybody had to be at meetings on time, so you didn't want people turning up at different times. So you had to have a central clock. You know, it's an efficient way of running a borough. So next one, listing. The building got listed at grade 2 star in 1981, and that says a lot. It was only 50 years old or 45 years old at the time, but 2-star is really significant. It's in the top 10% of all buildings that are listed in terms of its importance. So in 1981, people recognised Urine as being fantastic and this as being a really good town hall and a great example of its type. So as you can tell, it's partly because of its architecture that it's listed. You know, it's fantastic architecture, it's craftsmanship, it's a really beautiful building. But of course, there's that communal value. It means a lot to everybody that lives here, works here, has an interest in the building. And it's got a huge, long history that tells, you know, relates to the area and its development. So what happened to it? Unfortunately, in 1965, the boroughs of Haringey was created. I shouldn't say unfortunately, because that's not really the right thing, but it involved the merger of 3 different boroughs. So we had Hornsey, Tottenham and Wood Green. And as part of the merger, you don't want to operate multiple town halls. So they used an existing 1950s town hall as their main centre. And obviously for efficiency, they tried to keep everything together. So it's this major development on the corner of opposite Wood Green, in the middle of Wood Green, which is basically administrative offices from the sort of 1960s. Yeah, that's actually grade 2 listed, the Wood Green Town Hall. It's beautiful inside if you ever get in there. So this meant that Hornsey Town Hall was no longer the seat of power. And it basically, over the years, people gradually moved out of it. And by the 1980s, it was really largely vacant. Now, unfortunately, the thing I've realised with vacancy is that if a building's not used, it really is an issue. You know, if you live in your house, how much time do you spend and money just getting, you know, things cleaned, gutters cleared, building redecorated? How much of your income goes on that? If no one's in there, suddenly there's no income to do all these things. And the town hall sort of limped along for many years, and there was water ingress. There's a lot of asbestos, so not all areas were safe. And you know, you can see on the right-hand side just a little example of what water ingress can do over many years. And so it eats away at the wood and you get rot happening. You get the structure, some of the steel sometimes gets corroded and that blows off the outside bricks. The roofs get worn away. And what you need is really major investment to really remediate and come in and redo a building when it's got to that state of not too maintained for quite a few years. Next slide. So this is the function of our Heritage at Risk Register. Historic England actually administers the register for London, and we have all assets on it that are listed or registered. And Hornsey Town Hall, I think, went on in 2003. And that's when it became obvious that the building was starting to go into a state of decay. And when something goes on the at-risk register, it's not always a really negative thing. We like to think that we've got team members, etc., really focus on a building when it goes on the register. Keep an eye on it every year. They'll harass somebody to go and have a look. And they'll get others and themselves to positively engage with the owners and the local authorities to try and find strategies for getting the building off the at-risk register. So they always try and find out what's the root of the problem. Is it that the building's become defunct, or is it the building's got issues with ownership, or has it got issues with condition, or all of those? And then we'll try and formulate a strategy. So yeah, we tried for many years and went through, I think, at least one iteration of a scheme which was going to be an educational use, and unfortunately that fell through. So what do you do with town halls? And that is a big question, because we ended up with loads of them suddenly being vacated in the sort of end of the 20th century. And I've dealt with God knows how many over my years, which is quite scary really. But here's a few examples of uses that can actually go into town halls. So at Tottenham, there's kind of a business hub, which has really enlivened the building. It's very good. So that's top left. Bottom left is one I dealt with, which is Marylebone Town Hall. There's some Westminster functions still in there, but the rest is actually an educational use, the University of Westminster, which uses the grand spaces beautifully. And then you've got top right is the old Holborn Town Hall, which is a hotel now. And then Southgate Town Hall down the road from me is now housing. But that does mean that no one's ever going to get to go inside other than the people that live there. So it's not always the best use for me. Luckily, probably about 5 years ago or so, we were approached by Haringey, and they said, we really want to tackle Hornsey Town Hall because the educational use has fallen through. And so we'd like to go to the market. And I was going, right, okay, that's going to be fun. And yeah, so I pointed them, luckily, in the direction of this publication that we have, which is really well written. It's called Disposal of Heritage Assets. It's really aimed at government level, but it's totally applicable to a local level. And it really encourages the building owners, government, local level, to really think about being custodians and passing it on to the next generation, and the care of the building being the principal thing. There was a spate of things just flogged off to the highest bidder without really thinking about what the implication of that was for the building or the place. So it talks about marketing and thinking about criteria that aren't just simply money-based, but also introducing things like, how does it work in the community, this new use? Does it protect the heritage asset, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're scoring your different bidders against each other, some that actually do more for the heritage asset might score higher. And, so you get everything in proportion. And luckily, Haringey did actually do this, and this showed us the scoring system, and we were really quite pleased with that. So, and then they went out to the market, and we actually talked to quite a few of the bidders as a sort of independent body, giving them separately advice, which was given to the bidders, and they could then choose whether or not they put our advice into the bid. So we had no choice in the bid or who got it. But I do remember the project team from Far East Consortium actually came to me with the previous proposals and said, is there anything you don't like about these? And I was like, well, I don't like the way they've got rid of all the petitions in the back wing. And they said, fine, they're staying. I was like, okay. So, but otherwise, it's very similar scheme to what was previously consented, which made my life quite easy. And since then, we've obviously had Regine that's taken it on, and we're sort of working with her to work through many conditions, which we put on to make sure that the scheme is of the right quality and design. So I'm going to pass you over to Regine, who can tell you all about it.
Thanks very much, Claire. That was really, really interesting, and some of the things that I hadn't heard of as well, having worked with you for so many years. Hello, everyone. My name is Regine Kandan. I'm from Make Architects. I've been on the project since 2017, since the very beginning. I'm one of many members of the team. Kathy's here as well today. And I've been working predominantly on the Grade 2 star listed building, Hornsey Town Hall, which is right in the center and at the heart of the redevelopment of its site. Claire's spoken wonderfully about this listed building, and we adore it completely. We know it very, very well, and it was designed by Regine Kandan, and it's won an RIBA medal as well. And we worked very closely with Donald Insall Associates, historic building specialists, and uncovered a vast amount of archive information. You've seen some of the images that Claire has, and I've got similar ones in my presentation, because it really did inform and inspire our proposals from the very beginning and even until today. So these are some drawings from Reginald from the 1930s, and there were lots of journals and written work as well that Donald Insall Associates uncovered. We were very pleased to visit the Hornsey Historical Society and took quite a bit of information from there as well. So it's really informed how we started on the project and the next steps that we took in order to bring this building back to full occupation for many, many years to come. And I've got a picture of Reginald here because he deserves to be on the slide. He designed a wonderful building, and I've looked at so many of his drawings numerous times, and it's been incredible to see the amount of detail and the amount of creativity that's gone into a building of its time, and so much of it is still prevalent today. I mean, he designed services routes, he thought about flexibility of spaces, he designed the way in which spaces could work together or on its own, and it's a lot of forward thinking that's very 21st century that we've really taken on board in our project. And he had a very clever use of what was a very awkward site, and that was one of the reasons why he won the competition. He designed the building such that the office spaces that Claire's mentioned, so what's sort of in this blue highlighted zone here, could expand and grow in the future, but the civic spaces, which are more at the front of the building, would be permanent and would be used in the future for civic events and public events. And that's something that's very much how we started on the project as well, in terms of how we've almost managed to put in lots of different uses into this building, but keeping in mind its original architecture and its original intent. I've got some wonderful images here just to paint the picture of the building. I'm sure so many of you know it really, really well. This is the Assembly Hall. It's walnut proscenium right at the front, unfortunately covered over by modern drapes, and that's something that we will be restoring. As Claire mentioned, the upholstery, the curtains, the chandeliers would drop from the ceiling, and that's something that we're reusing as well. Indian laurel paneling and teak throughout. It's just really stunning spaces, as well as this council chamber just here. I'm going to go through some of these images because Claire's already gone through them, but it's really, what I really wanted to say was these spaces, as Claire says, were there when we started on the project, and it's really about repairs, really careful repairs and sensitive repairs, to not detract from its original qualities and to not be dishonest with its age, but really to embrace that as part of the design. The committee rooms on the left here and the members' room that you've seen in Claire's presentation. And also the communal spaces, so not just the office spaces of the civic spaces that were designed very beautifully by Regine Kandan. He thought very hard about how people would move around the building and how they would circulate. So I don't know if you can see here, but on the left, he designed the flooring to mimic the queue arrangement that one would follow as you approach the assembly hall. So it's all very, very detailed thinking that he had when designing the building at its time. On the left here is the rates office. That was where you went to pay your bills, and the mayor's parlor on the right. And then there were 9 very important rooms within the office block. They were rooms of heads of departments. So the one on the left is from the borough engineer's office. Don't understand why he didn't have a borough architect's office, but I'd like to think that the architect worked in there as well. And on the right here is the director of education. That's on the 2nd floor of the building. And of course, its architectural value is just incredible and wonderful, and as I say, it won an RIBA award. But something that I personally really enjoy about the project is its social and cultural values, and that's how I feel is significant to the building just as much as its physical makeup. It's the stories that it's told, the stories that it will have in the future once the building completes. And I think that contributes as much to its listing as Grade 2 star than it is of its architectural merit. And that maybe should be added into the description in the Historic England website. It is, of course, a celebrity building, being featured in many films and television programs. But one must not forget as well that it's carried lots of stories of the people who used to work there, the people who've met each other there. This is a tribute ceremony back in 2018, which I attended. And it was a wonderful ceremony to remember the building's past. And there was poetry and song and spoken word and a choir, and it was a really wonderful event to be in. And I remembered speaking to three sisters and a brother whose parents had met in the town hall in a swing dance class, and they had reconvened during the ceremony to just have a bit of a family reunion, and that was just a really wonderful thing to hear. And there are so many stories about this building that really deserves to be retold. So now we start with where we were when we started on the project. So 2017, as Claire mentioned, the building was at risk, and this is a photograph from back then. And I just wanted to touch on the fact that it's so important to look at the building in itself, but also its approach and how it's seen from the Broadway and its setting. We talk about the setting quite a lot in historic terms. And it's about how the building sits within its context that is just as important as the building itself. And Reginald Uren designed Town Hall Square. He not only designed the two buildings on either side, the gas and electricity buildings, but also the square itself as part of the approach and as part of that collection of architecture and landscaping in the building. And this is, I don't know if you can see on the left-hand side, that's a very, very old drawing from Reginald Uren. It's a kind of I call it a teardrop shape, it's like a tear. And it's one of the only drawings that we found of Town Hall Square. So he had a very different design back then, with a curved frontage and the landscaping that just sort of kissed the fountain right in the forecourt. And that was unfortunately lost over time. The green had changed, the configuration had changed slightly. And one of the things we looked at is to restore that as part of the approach to the building. So we went back to his drawing, we scrutinized it really well. On the right here is the square as we started on the project. So that had been changed over time. And our design reflects the original shape and form of this sort of curved form of the grass, embracing the fountain at the very end, just as you approach the building. So that's a visualization of how it would be when it's complete. And of course, the fountain, let's not forget that, a very focal and important element of the square. Unfortunately, not in use when we started on the project, but will be back in use as part of our landscaping design. And it's going to be a very vibrant square as you approach the building, full of activity. And we're now going to walk into the building, and this is how we found it back in 2017. As you look beyond some of the modern elements, so much of the historical elements still survived, and it was just really remarkable to slowly uncover that as we started on the project. Marble, bronze, steel, cork flooring, two types of stone, just really, really delicate metalwork and light features, just really beautiful elements that are part of our conservation for this building. And that's the beautiful staircase, the central staircase going up to the second floor. But of course, as you look beyond that, and we took many, many months to uncover the detailing of the building and to investigate its condition. As you look beyond that, there were elements that were failing. As Claire mentioned, it was very much in disrepair, and it needed a lot of work, not just in the first instance, but also a way in which would guarantee future maintenance for many, many years to come, and continued sustainable occupation. And as Claire says, it's on the risk register with Historic England. The ceiling was very much in need of repair. Parts of it were falling apart because of the roof being in very poor condition. As a result, the paneling was heavily affected by the water ingress, and this is in the assembly hall with the timber paneling, as well as some of the accommodation at the back. So some of you may not have been able to go to the accommodation at the back because it was never quite accessible, but it's beautiful spaces that are very much in need of use. And time and space, the art operators are going to really rejuvenate the use in these spaces. And of course, locally as well, areas of repair that was very much required, stonework not present at all. And you can see this little patch of cork repair on the floor here, which is very much not in keeping with the original cork. And that's something that we are addressing as part of the project. Of course, it was in use, but there were a lot of elements that needed a lot of care and attention. And that was really where we started from on the project. And really the main ambition is to take it off the risk register and for it to never go back on that register. So really the concept of what we're doing is to repair, restore, and repurpose. And I'll just go through those three elements with some photography and some drawings from today, photographs from today, but also drawings from the past. And firstly, about repair. So how many architects does it take to change a light bulb? But how many people do you need to investigate what we can do with timber paneling that's so beautiful, but in such disrepair and in such bad condition? This is ongoing. This is one of the first things we talked about when the contractor started on the project in 2019. It's still ongoing, and there's a sample that we're going to look at on Tuesday. Claire, brace yourself. We did a very thorough condition survey right from the very beginning, so that was floor by floor, room by room, even the smallest storeroom to the largest space. Each element was recorded, its floors, walls, ceilings, joinery, windows, any light fixtures, any special items, everything was recorded and surveyed in terms of its condition. In terms of its recording, our client, FICE Consortium, commissioned a thorough survey. So this is a measured photographic survey of the entire building, inside and outside. So these little bubbles, as you click on them and the computer just jumps to another photograph and you can just rotate around the model, and it's really incredible. But it captures the moment in time of the building, and it's really important to record historic buildings. We also spoke to many specialists. This is just a collage of images of the people that we consulted with for many months during the project, trying to think of where we can source the same brick, which we have. What's the condition of the timber flooring? It's very heavily damp in some areas. Can we get the window mechanisms to work again? Yes, we can, and we're doing that. Just lots and lots of surveys. Back then, even whilst the planning application was being decided, we were doing all of that. And even now on site, so it's fantastic that we are on site, we can get up close and personal with the elements. That's Claire actually walking and inspecting some of the balustrading and the committee rooms, just off the committee rooms. And it just allows us to get really close to the materials and just really try to understand what we can do with them. There was, of course, an aspiration back then when we were designing the building, and there's a bit of a reality as to what the condition is today and what specialists can do. And we're sort of marrying through, the design intent and realistically what we can do to each element, and each one is different. So these are just pages from our report as to the different levels of repair, green, amber, and red. Red meaning, oh my goodness, we need to look at this straight away. There's something very, very wrong going here. There's a whole host of paneling on the wall that's just completely disappeared and we need to put that back. Green meaning, oh, that's wonderful, it just needs a light touch clean and repair. Maybe not even a polish, not even repair, just a light clean, just to rejuvenate a bit of the detailing, so you see that through and it just revives itself. And in the large scale, this was the repairs to the roof. It's almost complete, so all the slate had to be taken off. A temporary roof was put up, all the slates being put back on. It's almost done actually. It's probably next week that will be done. So there was a lot of repair. above the assembly hall in the first instance to just stop the water from coming in. And we've had very wet weeks. These were some drawings that we produced for the paneling in the assembly hall, and again, color coding it. So trying to understand what are the elements that we can keep and what elements, unfortunately, we have to replace. The project very much takes into account the principle of repairing in the first instance and replacing only where necessary. And this is an example of what the ambition of the project from the very beginning. And this sort of drawing was done for many of the other rooms with the different elements. And this is how it was on site when we started. So every single panel was labeled, it was coded, so that we knew which wall it came from, where it stood in its context. And that was done first before any of the work was carried out. And then there are, of course, different types of repair. It really depends on the elements, so not one fits all, not one solution fits all. And these are two examples of bronze work, and they've both been addressed differently in consultation with Historic England and Haringey. Two different types of finishes on the window frames of the committee rooms and the balustrades facing them. So the balustrades, we've decided to have a very light polish and to rejuvenate them in a way that they would age in the future, and that was something that we would embrace as part of the building. These are the bronze gates, so images from left to right. That's when we started, and that's where we are now on the right-hand side. That's been worked by hand, every single element cleaned by two artisans on site, and they took an enormous amount of time. Actually, I kept seeing them there for weeks, and then brought it back to its quality. You can sort of see all the intricate detailing. Have a look when you're there, when the building opens, and then repatinated it so it just really stands out. Some of the leaves on the trees are just, on the branches are just really quite beautiful. And elsewhere, even the small elements need a lot of attention. So ironmongery on the windows, really bringing out the satin nickel qualities of the steel. There were benchmarks before this that actually polished the window handles way too much, and we really didn't want that. We didn't want it to look like a brand new building that's really shiny, but really wanted to just be true and be honest to its age. This is a picture of all the lights that are going to be repaired. So there's a vast amount of lighting, light fixtures in the building. This was a moment taken in time where the lighting designer, lighting specialist, was counting each one, just so we knew for sure that we had a certain number of quantities that we thought we had, and we do. But this is when it was all being counted for and then packaged and then brought to somewhere safe in order to be refurbished. And I put this slide in because there is quite a lot of salvage in the building. So I've mentioned the slate in the roof that was taken off and then put back. All the bricks that had to be taken off were also put back, so salvaged quite a lot of brick to the point where we ran out of salvaged bricks. So we're looking into sourcing new bricks. But also the timber parquet, where areas are being slightly altered, the materials aren't going to be lost. There's an area on the ground floor, for example, which requires the removal of some timber parquet, but in the committee rooms, it's the same timber parquet that we have. So in areas where the parquet has to be replaced, we'll be using the ones that we've salvaged from the ground floor. So that's really quite a nice way of addressing the materials and keeping as much of the existing fabric as possible. And then in terms of restoration, this section is about bringing back elements that have been lost in the building over time. And that was us going back to all the archive information, and it was almost like a spot the difference sort of exercise, a bit of detective work. An example of it is some of you may know the revolving doors at one of the entrances. That is an original, but there used to be these beautiful hinged glass doors with sort of decorative etching on them. That's picture on the left, and that will be made by a specialist and restored on site. So the revolving door will be replaced by something a door that used to be there before. Similarly, at the other entrance, currently there are solid doors. They were probably put in because of a change to fire regulations. But we can now source, we're at the stage where we can now source fire-rate glass, so that can go back into the building. Notice also the lighting that's different in the 2017 photograph, and a lot of the original lighting will be restored into the building. I mentioned the walnut proscenium, the drapes will go, and the height, the volume, and the grandeur of that walnut proscenium will be restored and will be enjoyed by all. The tapestry in the council chamber, what was there before was not the original, and also was heavily lined in asbestos. That's why it was covered up where you could touch it, actually, so you can't. I'm gonna do a Claire and go. That was all there to block people from touching the tapestry because it was lined in asbestos. But we've spoken to specialist fabric makers and looked through all the archive materials and replicated the tapestry. So that's a sample. That was done during lockdown, actually. A lot of the work was still done during the pandemic. We had lots of team meetings, and that sample was sent to my house. So that was very nice to see. But yeah, lots of restoration even in the fabrics. I mentioned the lighting. These lights have been sort of investigated in terms of what they used to be back then. And drawings have been created to replicate them, and a specialist will be doing that as well. And then Claire mentioned some furniture, and I forgot that we had that site visit, that warehouse visit together. Yeah, that was good memories of that. We walked into this warehouse and there was all this furniture. And I remember Kathy saying to me, let's take it all, because it was just so beautiful. And the fact that what we're doing in the building is having co-working space, there's a lounge, there's a cafe, all of this furniture is very much usable, reusable. So actually on Monday we have a factory visit all the way up in Birmingham to see the works in progress. So it'll be lovely to see. And they will be coming back into the building, as well as the selection, the set of furniture that used to be in the council chamber. Put little post-it notes to just check that everything's there. And all the furniture has been itemized. They've been given little codes. They know where they're going to go in the building when they come back. Obviously, we'll have to move them in the right position. But this, I don't know if you can see, everything in red. It's the original furniture from the town hall, and they've got their place. When they come back, they'll be okay. The clocks, Claire mentioned 78 of them. We haven't counted all of them, but we will. And they'll be put back as well. You can see little holes where they used to be now. So it's going to be a bit of detective work to put them back into the building and make them operational again. The synchronome clock is the one, and the two images here. That will be placed in the reception, the entrance reception on the ground floor. At the moment, it's in, or it was in one of the basement rooms. But being on the ground floor, we'd all be able to see it when the building reopens. So that's really lovely. That it's not just something that you and I know about, but everyone else will as well. The other things I wanted to mention were objects that we found in the building that were used when it was the town hall, and a bit of when it was sort of in transition after the formation of Haringey. So lots of town planning books and surveying equipment, really quite intricate, beautiful pieces, and little lettering, signage, bingo cards, all these little objects that we think are just as important as the fixed elements of the building and its material and its architecture. And we've selected some of them to go back into the building when it opens. So that would be really lovely to have a look around and see if you can find those. And then the last section that I have is about repurposing, and this is where it is really an architectural challenge. And it's thinking of a way in which we can sensitively adapt the building to a future use, which is sustainable, which can stand the test of time, just as the building has for so many years now. And we've worked with so many people with this aspect, but it was really going back to the archive photographs and drawings and to really try and understand what we can and cannot do to each space and to try and fit in the new use within the existing spaces. So as I say, the civic spaces are permanent and they will stay, and the office area would be transformed into a hotel. So that's a plan of what it will be in its proposed terms. And we've worked with a lot of people to try and get that right. We've got Time and Space who are here today, who run the Art Centre. So that's all the green and pink that you see on the plan here. And everything in blue would be the hotel run by Dorset International. So we've kept the plan form of the office spaces because it lends very well to being hotel use, and all the paneling as well that comes with it and the joinery. It's just worth saying that in terms of the repurposing that we're doing, of course, we're bringing the building up to the current building regulations in terms of fire, safety, and also accessibility. So there are 2 existing shafts in the building for lifts. Unfortunately, the lifts didn't work for years and years and years, and they can't be repaired. But we're putting some new lift cars into the shafts, so the whole shaft, the whole will stay the same, but the new car would go in, and that would be making the building completely accessible, which it never was. We're also putting a goods lift towards the back, so that the rear accommodation is also completely accessible. And this is from the Hornsey Town Hall Art Centre website. Really exciting things being planned for the building, and I mean that's a whole other talk that can't go into today, and members of Time and Space are here today if you want to talk to them after. But it's really going to be an exciting space, co-working, food and beverage provision, cinema, assembly hall, council chamber will all be back into events use, recording studios as well. And these are the 4 plans of the building from the lower ground to the 2nd floor, and everything in green and light green, sorry it's a bit faded, and pink will be publicly accessible and run by Time and Space. And everything in blue is the hotel. Everything in grey would be the back of house, just support all these new functions that will be in the building. And we always go back to the original drawings because it's about how the existing architecture can adapt to its new use. And this is an idea of how it would be. So the assembly hall being used as an event space, for performance, for rehearsals, for catwalks. There's a whole list of flexible events that can happen here. The former balcony seating would be turned into a screening room or a cinema, and we're reusing as much of the loft space as possible. That's a new accommodation. I'll have a slide after that. So it's really going to be quite a vibrant space, which will be publicly accessible. So that I've just got some previous and historic images here. That's the assembly hall. So we will put in a lot of new infrastructure, new lights. Obviously, everything will be fire compliant as well, and secondary glazing so that acoustically it can withstand events that we put up in the space. And the stage area will be also rejuvenated, and the dressing rooms at the back will be used as dressing rooms for the performances. That'll be really fantastic. This was the balcony seating that used to be in the building, and it was too far away from the stage. And as part of the original consent, there was an idea to turn that into a separate room, which we have. We then changed that consent and kept the tiered seats, the stepped arrangement. So the previous consent actually flattened the floor, but we thought, no, this is great, we love the steps, and we'll reuse that. And that's how it is today, actually. That's a photograph from Danbridge. So it's going to be a screening room or cinema, and we've kept, that's the original stepped arrangement, and the original stepped linings on the wall that you can see there, and that's all being kept. The council chamber, another event space, will have secondary glazing, new infrastructure as well, so power, data, new lighting, the ability to host events. Weddings can again take place here. I've heard that Marylebone Town Hall is the place to get married, and maybe Hornsey Town Hall will be its competition in the future. The committee rooms, again, will be an event space, great as a reading room. There's lots of ideas from Time and Space as to how the space will be used. Originally, it could subdivide into 3. When we started on the project, you couldn't do that because it had been altered, so that it could only subdivide into 2, not 3. So we're putting back that subdivision through a really sensitive alteration, a removal of some modern elements to put that sliding partition back in. So there's a bit of restoration in that as well. That's the members' room, which will be, again, publicly accessible. It's a meeting room, really beautiful space. That's where that scene from Bohemian Rhapsody was filmed. The mayor's parlour will be used as a meeting room. Again, there's not very much that would change in this room. It's just a bit of rejuvenation of the paneling because it's really in quite beautiful condition. That lighting, that pendant light will be restored because unfortunately, we've only found one and there used to be two. So we're doing a replica of the second one that used to be there. These are the dressing rooms at the back, so really, really beautiful spaces. And then they're really self-sufficient, so they have a toilet block as well, and a separate circulation. So that would be, the lift would now serve these rooms, so that will be completely accessible for those who need the lift. And these will be co-working rooms, meeting rooms, but also used as dressing rooms when there is an event in the assembly hall. That's the supper room downstairs, as it was before. Again, another event space, and there'll be a recording studio in there, and a commercial kitchen as well, in just beyond the space where the old kitchen used to be. So it's really reusing some of the old uses into new, with new modern infrastructure, and really bringing up the building to a more flexible use. And I put this slide in because amongst all the repurposing, there are lots of elements that will be retained. All the sanitary ware, the ceramic ware will be reused. So we've done an inventory of all the loos and all the basins in the building. It was quite a fun exercise. We have to put new taps in because they need to be up to building regs and all that kind of stuff. But the ceramic ware is really beautiful and it will be reused. Hooks, we still need hooks today. We still wear coats. So that's going to stay, that's not going to go anywhere. Some of the marble features will stay as well, actually all of it. Ironmongery, these little switches, these toggle switches, we can't reuse them for, obviously we need to get all the electrical wiring certified and up to speed to today. But we've kept them on site because they're just really beautiful and they're part of the building as much as the larger elements of the building. And just in the bottom corner there, that's the 4 doors to safes, the John Tan steel doors, and they'll be retained in the building as well. So they're not going anywhere as well. And just in terms of repurposing, I just wanted to show the reuse and adaptation of a loft space. So that's at the top here, which was a non-space before. I'm doing another Claire. And that will be a new co-work space right at the very top. And it's in progress at the moment. That was how it was before. This is how it's looking today. Just going to be a really lovely space to work in. And it's a brand new space within the existing fabric, so that's not an extension, but really just a reuse of existing. That's the roof terrace. Claire and I talk about having a drink there constantly. One day we will. 5 years on the project, and we're still talking about that. Works are underway. There's a massive amount of work that has to be done here. The committee rooms are just below this, so it was quite wet a few weeks ago, so we had to be really, really careful with all the water ingress. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's going to look fantastic, and there'll be views to Alexandra Palace from up here, and that's all. It's publicly accessible as well. So we just move on to the hotel, just to touch on a few elements that is rather important in terms of conserving the building. The hotel itself, design itself, takes into account, is inspired by all the existing elements, the herringbone timber flooring, consistency of the horizontal datum, metal detailing, and pendant lights that are very much prevalent in the existing building. And that's a modern interpretation of what is there in terms of the interior design of the hotels. But I wanted to touch on the 9 special, what we call special rooms, the 9 paneled rooms of the building. So they were, as I said, the heads of offices used to have these rooms, and this is the borough engineer's room. And the picture on the right is what it was like when we started on the project. You can see that it's slightly altered. There's a door on the right where there isn't one before, or it's slightly different. We went into these rooms and absolutely loved the paneling. So we're reusing all of the paneling, keeping them as part of these rooms. And we did that by recording each of them. So that's all of them labeled. This is an example of what we did in each of the 9 rooms. Then we drew them up and elevated all the walls and labeled each panel. So each panel has its code, its number. And then we adapted them to the hotel room layout, to the guest room layout, such that every panel has its place. Some will need altering, some don't need any altering at all. But every single panel will be reused as part of the design. And where there are these really amazing, intricate joinery elements that used to be in these rooms, they will be adapted to house the wardrobes for the hotel rooms, the kitchenettes, any sort of shelving that we would have in the guest rooms. So it was really a really creative design process for us, actually, and really rewarding in terms of seeing how this paneling could be put into modern use, but still kept in the building. This will be the reception as we come into predominantly the hotel reception, but it is a free-flowing double reception space that any members of the public can go through. And these two inquiry desks that you see at the top image here, that was when you used to ask questions as you come into the town hall. They'll be used as a concierge facility. So again, you'll be asking questions at these little kiosks, which we're hardly changing at all, actually. The only thing we're doing is removing some of the modern fixtures that have gone into it. I'm very sorry about the fuzziness of this photograph, but it's just here. So that will be carefully removed so that the openness of these curved elements will be appreciated again. The rates desk, I mentioned before, that will be kept in the co-working space where it is today, and it will be reused. We will remove the modern elements that you can see. It used to be very open, so a lot of modern interventions have been added into it. That will be removed and the desk reused. This used to be the ballots desk, so the little holes that you see there, that's where you used to cast your vote. And it used to be used as a very large reception desk in the main foyer, but we're using that space for seating, as a lounge, as a kind of community public lounge. So we no longer need very large reception desks. What we would like to do is change the desk into a sofa. So that'll be a very creative adaptation as well. Very much looking forward to that. So when we started on the project, the building had to be protected inside and outside, and a lot of work went into that. A lot of asbestos was taken out, as Claire mentioned. There's a lot that's going on inside the building that isn't seen from the outside. That's a scaffolding that's been put up so that that temporary roof can be put up, so that all the slate can be taken off, so that the roof can be repaired, so the ceiling doesn't fall down. So there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. That's an image from the top, from one of the residential units looking at the town hall. And then lots of benchmarking. So we've gone through a lot of benchmarking, trying to decide how much we take away from the grime, the dirt and the layers that have perhaps diminished the quality of some of the materials that were there, but not to do that too much. So this is someone just putting their finger saying, this is how much we need to do it, not too much. There's a lot of benchmarking going on site. There was a photograph from Dan quite recently. So a lot of the windows are already decorated. So you can see that from the outside, actually, and it's really looking very, very beautiful. And I just wanted to put this up. There's some little lettering here. Really enjoy just showcasing some of the work that went into the building before. So the manufacturers, the suppliers that worked on the building when it opened. And it's just showcasing some of that little snippets of information that we really enjoy. As I say, lots of benchmarking, lots of samples being looked at. It needs a long process to make a decision, and that's just ongoing. And I love this, that we have these really nice surprises on site. This is at the back of one of the paneling in the council chamber, and it says, Hornsey Council Chamber, I can't read that word, to front of door frame F31 1790. And so that's one particular panel from the council chamber, and that's the back of it. I want to think that Reginald Uren wrote that, but who knows? There have also been some sad surprises, good surprises, sad surprises. Those are some images of the timber paneling. It's in quite a lot of disrepair. A lot of it cannot be salvaged. So we're looking into what we can salvage and what we can do. So again, lots of benchmarking, lots of samples, lots of mock-ups. This is fresh from Monday, and we're going to look at that together on Tuesday, Claire and I, and scrutinize that mock-up. Again, a nice surprise, uncovering the tiling that used to be on that column. And that was something we found, I think it was the first or second week on site together. So really lovely being able to uncover things that are still there today and to keep that as part of the building. And just lots more going on site. You can see a lot of it from the outside already, from the front, looking at, from the Broadway, looking towards the building, and that's the back. Claire mentioned that there's a really beautiful curved window, just looking really, really stunning at the back. And I'm just going to end with this one photograph, also from Dan, from this week, of this really beautiful bronze gates, and it's just saying, you know, very much welcoming everyone to come back to this building, and this is just a hint of what is to come as you walk into the building. Thank you very much.